Many years ago, I was helping lead a community meal with people experiencing homelessness. And it was much more of a raucous dinner party than it was a sort of like sterile soup kitchen, right? There were spontaneous dance parties, and there was a really thick sense of community. About 100 people or so came every single week for food and for community. And we met every single Sunday, so that means that we never missed a week, right? It didn't matter what was happening or what holiday there was. We never missed a week. And so when Christmas Eve fell on a Sunday, well, we were going to meet for dinner, right? That's what you do. And in fact, we couldn't think of a more appropriate way to celebrate the entrance of God into the world than to gather with people who were often forced to live on the margins of society. But a week before the Christmas Eve meal, though, the church that hosted us told us that we couldn't use their space on Christmas Eve. And they had a large, beautiful building, but we'd have to find somewhere else for dinner because they had a contemplative service planned, and they needed things to stay quiet. Plus, they had a wine and cheese party planned for after the service in the fellowship hall, the place where we usually gathered. No room in the inn. Sound familiar? We tried to find an alternative space, but in the middle of downtown Chicago, with such short notice on Christmas Eve, we couldn't do that without spending a small fortune. So the church very reluctantly decided to let us gather in their very dingy basement. With an unusually large crowd that night of 150 guests, we crammed into a room meant for 75 people max. Well before COVID, of course. We gave out gifts and we had conversation, but we weren't even allowed to eat down there. So we had to send people out with to-go plates into the freezing cold, knowing that they had no home to return to. As they walked out into the cold, this is the worst part. The windows were open to the fellowship hall, our normal space. Imagine if all of these stained glass windows were clear. You could see straight through them, and on the other side was not outdoors, but was the fellowship hall. Inside of the fellowship hall were about 20 church members eating good cheese and drinking really good wine in a room big enough for 150. Our 150 guests had just been crammed into a dingy, dirty basement where they weren't even allowed to eat. As they exited the building, just like they were walking down this aisle, they looked inside to the 20 people eating cheese and drinking wine as we handed them one of those flimsy styrofoam plates full of food and tried to muster up the capacity to say Merry Christmas. The juxtaposition was stark, and I still get a little nauseous thinking about it, honestly.